Today is September 13th. Mr. Roman, just in the footage we just saw, it's a remote mining machine. Since they appeared there, it means that the Russians have started to mine Russian territory, the Russian Federation. And this is good, because these mines will take them tens of years to find. And this was one of our tasks when entering Russian territory, to create a certain security zone only at the expense of Russian land, not at the expense of Ukrainian land. And what is happening now in the Kursk direction is just this creation of a security zone. Moreover, in addition to the fact that the Russians are mining, well, they are trying to we are destroying some of their installations, like on these shots, an epic video. But they are mining their territory. They are destroying their villages. They're destroying their infrastructure. If we started to do this, we would be slapped on the wrist by the great international dudes. And so as it turns out, the Russians, trying to attack or counterattack somewhere, somehow are tearing down Russian territory to zero. In other words, a security zone is being created for us. Well, for now, at a depth of about 25 to 30 kilometers. It is realistic, of course, to create it to a depth of 70, 80 kilometers. But this is somewhere up to Kursk, or say up to Belgorod, towards Bryansk, depending on the total length of the border. And then further south, towards Voronezh and Rostov. And here, on this territory, hostilities are now taking place. And the Russians are practically moving as if according to a written plan predicted by our military commanders. The movement of the Russians now, let us say towards Snagosty, naturally caused our reaction, i.e. we were waiting for all this to happen. We once talked about these issues. It is impossible there. It is impossible to drive up, to gather, to move without intelligence tracking it all. As soon as the Russians started moving towards the east, that is, they're trying to push our troops out of the Snagosty area here from the west. Good evening, we are from Ukraine, as they say. Our troops started moving from our territory towards Saim, to cut off Tetkino, to break up the group. And these actions are now taking place. Again, all military operations, the destruction of the enemy, the destruction of their strongholds, or the settlements that they use as strongholds, all of this is taking place on Russian territory. In other words, Russian territory is being cleared by military actions, frontally cleared for the creation of a security zone in the future. The right actions. Mr. Roman, there is footage of our guys and girls working Heimers and hitting enemy groups. I can see that from the footage. Obviously, it's a pontoon crossing. It's in the Saim River area. You bring up, by the way, that our defense forces are counterattacking. Volodymyr Zelensky said yesterday that the AFU was waiting for the occupants' counteroffensive actions. And in general, there is now movement in populated areas. If we say it's Novi Put and in the direction of Vesologo, I understand that they between, as you said, Tetkino and Glushkovo. It's an ogre position that was in the Ottomany on the bank of the Same. Now it's just going to be cut up and liquidated in smaller pieces, so to speak. Conducting maneuver battles, it implies movement of troops to one side and to the other. The main task of which is not to capture territories. We are not Russians. We don't need other people's territories. The main task of which is to destroy the enemy, and the more the enemy tries to advance somewhere, cross the Saim, move somewhere, crowd in a certain amount of forces and means, it will be easier to destroy him. And this main task of destroying the enemy is performed by our troops in maneuver battles. This is what we are seeing now. This is the second level of professionalism and includes planning. The Russians have the task of seizing territories and then trying to bend the world community, Ukrainian society, in order for us to give up these territories or allow Russian troops to stay there. We have another task, which is very simple. to destroy the enemy, to destroy them to zero, wherever possible, and then to create situations where it is possible, on some part of the front, on some ground, to destroy them more. Our guys in Kursk region are dealing with this issue now. It would be better if no one lived there, no one was there, that is, at a depth of 50 kilometers. And it is Russian troops that are engaged in clearing out future settlements. They are clearing themselves, and no world organization will charge them with anything.
От будущих поселений занимаются как раз российские войска. Они сами себя зачищают. Причем никакая общественная, вернее, никакая мировая организация им же ничего не предъявит. То есть российские войска уничтожают российскую...
Russian troops are destroying Russian villages, or rather, Russian villages, Russian settlements, towns. They do what they want. They are the boss. They do what they want on their territory.
Создать эти условия. Вот наш заход на Курщину создал такие условия, чтобы россияне зачистили уже для нас на российской территории несколько десятків кілометрів площі.
Пане Романе, якщо от, власне, дивитися по карті, що ми промалювали, червона стрілочка от перша, от в цьому напрямку.
Could this mean that it would be such a significant and important entry with heavy equipment and everything necessary to gain a foothold in this direction? To be honest, Dragon's Teeth is atavism, based on the task of military and fortification, among other things, especially when they just stand there, as they do here, pockmarked on top, thrown over the fields.
Исходя из задачи военной, по крайней мере, и фортификационной в том числе, особенно когда они просто стоят, как вот...
The equipment that performs this task, the engineering equipment, opens them up, makes passages, and there is nothing to counter it. That's why it's such a good write-off of cash flows. The money that was written off for the production of these dragon's teeth went into the pockets of Russian governors.
Потому это такое хорошее списание денежных потоков, рассовывание по карманам, в основном деньги, которые списывались на производство этих зубов.
Because the ironworks, they're mostly owned by the government. Because they paid themselves and then scattered them in the fields, what's the use of dragon teeth? Absolutely none, except for pictures and estimates for write-offs. This, by the way, concerns us too.
Фотографий и смет под списание денег. Это, кстати, и нас тоже касается. Вопрос, эти зубы дракона, они могут останавливать противника только если там проведено...
These dragon's teeth can stop the enemy if certain fortification measures involving dragon's teeth are necessary to equip ditches. It is a whole process, and the teeth should be buried in the ground to a depth of about 1.5 meters, so that engineering equipment could not dig them out. It is unrealistic. What the Russians have sketched out is just for show, nothing more than that. But it is normal for us. Secondly, have created a deceptive sense of security on some fronts, and we're cracking down on them very quickly. Well, it's just not going to last. I think they will just bury these dragon teeth in the fields, and then they will transport them, maybe sell them to Lukashenko. He is also going to make something from dragon teeth. But in reality, of course, they are best used as some kind of breakwaters. That is, to dump them in the harbors in order to, well, this is for later. I mean, after we clear all this space, to use them later simply for breakwaters, transferring them to the harbors. Mr. Roman, this already looks like malice and mockery of Ukraine. But again, our partners have said that their weapons have struck deep into Russian territory. David Lammy and Anthony Blinken have come to Kiev, and now the Times says the U.S. will give the go-ahead to use Storm Shadow missiles on Russian territory, but they will not allow them to fire ATACMS missiles because it would escalate the conflict. I always say it directly, so to speak, to the point. Why are they chewing snot? They'd have swallowed it or spit it out by now. And this is chewing the same old stuff from empty to empty. you don't need to pay attention to it. It is one thing to run around with your ATAC-MS like a fool with a stupa. They are holding on, or rather in the information flow. And the most interesting thing is that the main reason for this is not escalation at all. It's the agreements that were reached by Biden and his Bidenites with Putin, that they would not use American weapons. Even there were agreements, as far as I understand, that they would not allow them to enter the Russian territory. That they would not allow them to enter the Russian territory. Before Oskol, it should not be why Putin in principle was not ready for our troops to enter Kursk, Bryansk, Belgorod, and still, by the way, they are not ready. They are trying to pressurize our military leadership through the Americans so that we no longer enter Russian territory, but also come out with Kurshchina. The pressure is definitely coming. The only thing that can already be sent on the course of the Russian ship is this outgoing Biden team. Most likely our troops, at least the military troops, do exactly that. But they are trying to somehow participate in the decision-making, even when a few months ago the British confirmed not just one prime minister, but both the old prime minister and the new prime minister confirmed authorization for Storm Shadow and Scalp to operate on Russian territory. Then, the Americans intervened and stopped this movement, as missiles use American satellites for guidance. Naturally, they were somehow involved in this thing. Why? Because the Russians started pulling them out of these agreements. How they greased them is another question. But it is clearly visible. They are already starting to be laughed at by everyone in the world, i.e., some clowns. Biden's already with these Bidenats, his clowns, especially on this issue. And the interesting thing is that every week he raises it, lowers it, raises it, lowers it. It's just clowning around. And the British here, of course, they have never moved from their promises, if in slang. That is, they know very well our capabilities, our needs. They are ready to use storm shadows on Russian territory, especially Britain. The British Crown is at the forefront of efforts to break up the Russian Federation, alongside Ukraine, though for different reasons. The collapse of Russia would benefit state development and security. The British Crown will continue to support us, but the key issue lies in coordination with the Americans, particularly regarding navigation. If our long-range weapons rely on American GPS, we must understand the implications of that dependence. Вот этот вопрос большой, через навигацию. Потому нам надо уже сейчас понимать, что впереди, если мы будем строить наши дальние средства поражения, они, если будут завязаны... So we need to understand now that if we build our long-range means of defeat, and if they are tied to American satellites, to American GPS navigation, and what is GPS for? To perform precision strikes. To produce missiles, drones that will fly on other means, directions that will perform this flight with georeferencing, inertial systems, different. Let it not be a circular probable deviation of 1-2 meters, let it be 100-200 meters, but then just increase the ammunition that will cover these 100-200 meters. And Biden, not Biden, who knows who will come after Biden. Probably something better will come. But the point is that you cannot immediately put your own needs on someone else's capabilities. And the Europeans should also realize that all their armaments, which they have produced, if all of them are tied to American satellites, are by and large just a pile of iron. And if the Russians get into the head not of Biden, but of the next president, they can do it. This pile of iron will remain in Europe. It just won't be able to fly, it won't be able to perform combat missions. They have to leave too. Either hang up their satellites and tie in to their positioning system, or completely get away from this issue, realizing that the White House is pulling the strings through the positioning system. The same is the problem in attracting Israeli corporations and enterprises to modify or improve military equipment. They themselves can also stop this movement at any time or prevent it from being transferred. This is how the Israelis prevented us from transferring airplanes in 22, Polish airplanes with their advanced avionics, and so on and so forth. In Europe, it is necessary to solve the issues inside Europe. European security concerns only Europe. All the others are standing next to each other, only making money on some topics or trying to manage. And here is the same picture. That is, Biden, it is called, if so a little bit in slang, forgive me listeners, political. That's what Biden is doing. It's political, which has already annoyed everyone and everything, especially with these long-range means of destruction. God willing, the British will sell this issue and we will eventually be able to work with cruise missiles on Russian territory. Only now there will be nothing to work on. Biden has given the Russians the opportunity to take out planes beyond the 250-300 kilometer range. That is to say, now we will no longer be able to destroy Russian planes that are dropping Kaybes on Kharkiv on cross-border sites. Mr. Roman, there is information about the south. Andriushenko, the advisor to the mayor of Mariupol, showed footage of our forces hitting the south. It's in the area of Portovskoye, Rybatskoye, Malakino. This is on the coast of Mariupol. I see that we are also working on the southern Azov coast, the southern direction. If we look at the flight path of future missiles, let's say, or drones, then this is just an attempt to clear this route of enemy air defense systems. The general direction, that is, the destruction, is in the triangle near Mariupol. The general direction towards Taman, that is, in the Kerch-Rostov-Novorossiysk triangle. That's about right. Naturally, preparations for routing the passage of missiles or aircraft after Kerch-Rostov-Novorossiysk begin. Somewhere like this, that is, this passage, Rostov a little to the east, that is mainly to Taman, and towards the Rostov region on the Kuban, well, Novorossiysk included. Therefore, without ruling out the possibility that this is a preparation for certain actions to work on the Kerch Bridge, on the Novorossiysk terminal, on the port of the Caucasus, on the Taman military facilities that are located there, on the Rostov facilities, among others. They are hampered because our missiles have already come in several times by this air defense group, which is located in the Mariupol area. Here's a sweep that was pretty serious tonight. There were strikes on all scouted targets, still detonating, which means they hit either the loading vehicles or the missile depots. Well, the surface-to-air missile systems themselves were definitely destroyed. Еще раз повторюсь, не исключая возможности удара наших средств поражения разного уровня, может быть баллистическая, может быть крылатые ракеты, может быть беспилотники по этому направлению. Mr. Roman, in our information field, this news somehow passed by until the Russians themselves showed the footage. It turns out that on August 23rd, we are from Tarkhankut. This is not the first time, by the way. Our defense forces again hit the Russian missile system C-400 and the launcher. And even they say that the Neptune missile also destroyed the radar. But the footage is really powerful. We indicated at the time that there had been strikes, but we simply did not have confirmation, not from the main intelligence directorate. This is a separate part. It is difficult to confirm the defeat there unless the Russians themselves post it somewhere, in some of their publics. They are drawing information flow from Russian publics, among other things. Only now there is 100% confirmation. Without it, of course, no one would say that the target was hit. So there was an attempt to defeat it, and we talked about it at the time. And the fact that it was defeated, well, now we can talk about the fact that our Navy, because Neptune is a missile of the Neptune coastal missile system, is subordinate to the Navy.
Ракета берегового ракетного комплекса БРК «Нептун», они подчиняются военно-морским силам.
Mr. Roman, if we talk about the northern direction, our defense forces have set a new record. The 46th Air Mobile Brigade showed video of the Russians trying 4 on September 12th, yesterday, in such waves to attack our positions in the northern direction near Kurakovo. They used 46 pieces of equipment. There were APCs, BMPs, and whatnot. Our defense forces, the 46th Brigade, destroyed more than 24. Other equipment was destroyed, and the Russians achieved absolutely nothing, having lost a record amount of equipment in one offensive. Recently, approximately 2/3 of all Russian offensive attacks and operations have been carried out in the Kurakhov direction. And over the last 24 hours, about 75% of the attacks were in the Kurakhov direction. They are trying to reach Kurakovo, to close it. There are 2 cauldrons there, an operational encirclement a little bit west of Donetsk, northeast of Kurakovo. And now the Russians are trying to reach Kurakovo from 3 sides. Attempts are being made with the full use of all the means of destruction that they have, including equipment. The equipment is used not 10 to 20 as it was before, that is, the assault group was supported, but mostly by companies. They come in, they try to come in. At most, there are 10, 15, maybe 20 boxes. And now they go up to 50 boxes trying to break through, to sell this direction. First of all, to take our guys into an encirclement. Secondly, to go out and cut the supply lines of the Kurakhov garrison. The opposition of our troops is weakened for various reasons. Lack of personnel, means of defeat, and the fact that we are already here in such a sack practically. It is already clear, the Russians, coming to Pokrovsk, have put almost the entire Kurakhovsky garrison in operational encirclement mode. Because this is a very difficult area, if a decision is not made in a very short period of time to put the TCCs, the full National Guard, the full Border Guard, and at least 30% of the National Guard, at least there. Нацгвардии в полном составе пограничников, в полном составе, по крайней мере, там хотя бы 30% Нацгвардии. Это уже, в принципе, делается, но вот туда, на это направление надо увеличивать. We need to increase both personnel and equipment to confront Kurakovo. And this is the loss of practically the entire southwest of Donbass. Потеряем Курахово, это потеря практически всего юго-запада Донбасса. А это даст возможность россиянам беспрепятственно двигаться по железной дороге, по сухопутной железной дороге, которую они проложили в последнее время. Но только угледарский гарнизон давал возможность как-то контролировать ее в If we are squeezed out of this direction, we will lose this opportunity. Then the entire Russian land corridor will be very well supplied. This includes the left bank of the Dnieper, the Zaporizhzhia direction. Then they will be able to prepare offensive operations there for the next year. Therefore, in no case should we give up Ugledar and Kurakovo. And once again, the only mechanism now is to put the internal troops in service. If they can be called that altogether, the National Guard, which by the way is the former internal troops, and send them in this direction. Mr. Roman, there is also footage, which is kind of strange, of a plant of the military-industrial complex of the Russian Federation in Omsk burning itself. It's called Omsk Transmash. Turns out the fire started on the roof of one of the shops there. Well, nothing's ever going to burn on its own. If stars are lit, it means someone needs it. If it started to burn, it means that someone needed it. Most likely, it is the continuing work of those internal resistance groups that exist in this area. Omsk is about 3,000 kilometers from Ukraine. Well, depending on which point. More than 2,000. That's for sure. And at such ranges, of course, we have no means of defeat, at least not yet, because most likely this is the work of the resistance forces inside Omsk itself. Before that, one part of the oil pre-treatment unit at the Omsk refinery, the biggest one, was destroyed, if you remember. Russia's 21 million tons by year of oil refining. And now one of the serious plants, military plants for the production of military equipment, is on fire. It doesn't just happen like that, because I think a serious underground has already been organized there, if I may say so.
Там уже организовалось серьезное подполье, если так можно сказать, и лучше, конечно, говорить о силах.
It is better, of course, to talk about the forces of resistance and struggle for independence of some regions of Russia. Especially beyond the Urals, when such action begins, it is working internal forces that will lead to the collapse of the Russian Empire. The Ukrainian Defense Ministry said that more F-16s will appear in Ukrainian skies because Ukrainian pilots have started training in Romania. Romania is helping us a lot. We have already thanked Romania many times, but I am not afraid to thank Romania once again. The Romanian government gave us a shoulder immediately, from the first seconds of the Russians coming in, the large-scale attack by the Russians in 2022. They prepared many sites for the transshipment of civilian and military products. They have built new logistics chains for one and other tasks. They have built at their place, in a very fast time, built at their place, deployed several air bases where French, British, Norwegian, American airplanes are now based. That is, there is a serious NATO outpost on the Black Sea, Romania. And it all helps us. And now they have also taken on training. Our group of pilots are already being trained, and they will finish their training at the beginning of the year. Next year, that is, there is an accelerated course. They will definitely be trained in about 6 months. First of all, it is close by, and secondly, it is our group that will receive maximum attention. Plus, the Netherlands has transferred Spark airplanes there. F-16s with 2 cockpits have gone there just for this task. I think that Romania will help us further, of course. Our neighbors. This is how neighbors should behave. Like the Romanians, like the Poles, even the Baltic states, even if they are not our neighbors at the moment. I think that one day we will be neighbors with them. Once we were together in one state that opposed the horde from the east. So I think through the European Union, through NATO, we will still be in one common house. And now we are already in a European house, because all our closest friends near Ukraine, of course, help us. Romanians directly show this participation. Thank them, of course, for this.
Пане Романе, глава МЗС Литви традиційно чітко висловилися щодо війни в Україні. Вони кажуть, що перемога України має стати стратегічним пріоритетом. Ну, от ми вже неодноразово з вами говорили, що саме країни Балтії, вони чітко артикулюють, завжди й допомагають, та серйозно. І нема в них цих вагань, типу, яка має бути перемога, от як Блінкен
Mr. Roman, the Lithuanian foreign minister, has traditionally been clear about the war in Ukraine. They say that winning Ukraine should be a strategic priority. There they clearly state that should be a strategic priority. А помогают с 2014 года инструкторами, поддерживают техникой, боеприпасами, информацией разведывательной и так далее и тому подобное. То есть страны Балтии с нами вместе уже... In other words, the Baltic states have been fighting against Russia together with us for 11 years now, realizing perfectly well what Russia is, realizing that their internal front can also create the same conditions as they were created in Crimea, in Donbass, and the Russians can rock it and take advantage of it. That is why they have a clear task, and they have the same task as us, and articulation, and naturally information flow. They immediately put the main task. When the light at the end of the tunnel is clear, then it is clear which tunnel to follow. The defeat of the Russian Federation, the defeat of the Russian army, the destruction of the Russian state, as such. That is the collapse of the Russian Empire. It will give Europe at least hundreds of years to live without the problems from the East, which for 1,000 years, or even 2,000 years, if not more recently, have been piling up on Europe. It is an Eastern problem, indeterminacy at home. It's a habit of living at the expense of others, it's called. They can't build anything in their own country, so they go where other people have built. And this problem can only be solved by destroying the Russian Empire, breaking it up into constituent clusters, and then we will form relations with these clusters and figure out how to live with it later. What pleases the positions of some leaders of the Baltic states, including the countries of Europe, some representatives of America, and are not afraid to say it. That is, they are not afraid to throw it into the information flow. For some reason, I do not understand why our military and political leadership cannot speak so clearly on all platforms about the goals and objectives of combat operations and relations with Russia in general. Mr. Roman, thank you. It's Friday, September 13th. Be sure to subscribe. Be sure to like and share this information. Like and share. With you was Igor Gavrishak. See you on the air of Channel 24.